Winter 1943, the Eastern Front, a frozen hellscape where two empires collided in the most brutal theater of World War II, among the rubble of Stalingrad, the forests of the Carpathians, and the endless steppes stretching toward Moscow. A different kind of war was being fought, a silent war, a war of patience, precision, and nerves of steel. This was the domain of the sniper. One shot, one kill, no second chances. In the hands of skilled marksmen, two rifles became legendary. The Soviet Mosin-Nagant Model, 1891-30, and the German Carabiner 98k, both bolt-action rifles, both chambered in powerful, full-sized cartridges, both responsible for thousands of confirmed kills. But which one was truly superior? Which rifle gave its user the edge in the deadliest hunting ground humanity has ever known? Today we're diving deep into the frozen trenches, the bombed outbuildings, and the snowy forests where these two weapons clashed. We'll examine their design, their accuracy, their strengths and weaknesses, and most importantly, the men who wielded them. Because this isn't just a story about metal and wood, it's about Vasily Zaitsev, the Soviet shepherd turned sniper, who became a national hero with 243 confirmed kills during the Battle of Stalingrad, and Matthäus Hetzenauer, the young Austrian mountain peasant who became Germany's deadliest sniper with 345 confirmed kills in just 10 months of combat. Two rifles, two legends, one Eastern Front. The question isn't just which rifle was better engineered. The question is which rifle in the hands of a trained killer delivered victory when it mattered most. Which weapon turned ordinary soldiers into ghosts who could end lives from hundreds of meters away without ever being seen? The answers might surprise you, because while one rifle was praised by enemies who captured it, the other was feared for the doctrine and training system built around it. Let's find out which rifle truly won the Eastern Front. Let's compare every aspect, from the factory floor to the frozen battlefield, and determine once and for all which was the ultimate sniper rifle of the Eastern Front. But before we dive into specifications and kill counts, we need to understand the context. The Eastern Front was unlike any other battlefield in World War II. It was a war of annihilation, where millions of soldiers fought across thousands of miles in conditions that range from minus 40-degree winters to scorching summers. In this environment, snipers became psychological weapons as much as tactical assets. The fear of an unseen enemy, one who could kill officers, machine gunners, and radio operators with impunity, was devastating to morale. Both the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany recognized this early. They invested heavily in sniper programs, developing training schools, tactical doctrines, and specialized equipment. The Soviets, learning from their disastrous experience against Finnish snipers during the Winter War of 1939-1940, built a massive sniper training infrastructure. They produced over 330,000 Mosin-Nagant sniper rifles between 1941 and 1943 alone, an industrial feat that reflected their determination to dominate this silent battlefield. The Germans, with their tradition of precision engineering and marksmanship, developed sophisticated optical sights and established sniper schools that emphasized fieldcraft, camouflage, and patience. Their snipers were trained with the mantra, "Survival is 10 times camouflage and 1 time firing." These weren't just soldiers with scoped rifles. They were hunters, stalkers, and tacticians who understood that one well-placed bullet could change the course of a battle, and the rifles they carried were extensions of their will, tools that had to perform flawlessly in the most unforgiving conditions imaginable. So when we compare the Mosin-Nagant and the Kar-98k, we're not just comparing firearms, we're comparing entire philosophies of warfare, industrial capacities, and the human element that transformed these tools into legendary instruments of death. Let's begin this comparison with the foundation, the rifles themselves. The Mosin-Nagant Model, 1891-30, was a rifle born from necessity, refined through decades of service, and perfected for one purpose: reliable performance in the harshest conditions on Earth. Its story begins in the late 19th century when the Russian Empire sought to modernize its military. Captain Sergei Mosin designed the basic action, while Belgian brothers Emile and Léon Nagant contributed the 5-round internal box magazine. The result was a rifle that entered service in 1892 and would serve through the Russo-Japanese War, World War I, the Russian Revolution, and ultimately World War II. By 1930, the Soviets had refined the design into the Model 1891-30, which became the standard Red Army rifle. When the Great Patriotic War began in 1941, the Soviets immediately recognized the need for specialized sniper rifles. They pulled Mosin-Nagants from assembly lines and sent them to skilled gunsmiths who performed critical modifications. The bolt handle was bent downward to clear the telescopic sight. The front sight was raised by 1 millimeter, allowing snipers to engage targets with iron sights out to 600 meters if the scope was damaged. The trigger pull was lightened to between 4.4 and 5.3 pounds, making the rifle more responsive to the shooter's intent. Most importantly, each rifle was hand-selected for accuracy. Only the straightest barrels and the tightest actions made it through the selection process. The result was a weapon capable of minute of arc accuracy, ranging from 1.5 to below 1.0, meaning groups of less than 1 inch at 100 meters. This was exceptional for a mass-produced military rifle. The standard Soviet sniper scope was the 3.5 power PU sight, a simple but robust optic that could withstand the brutal temperature swings of the Eastern Front from minus 40 degrees Celsius in winter to plus 30 in summer. The Mosin-Nagant's greatest strength was its legendary reliability. The action was loose by Western standards, with noticeable play between components, but this was intentional. Soviet engineers understood that in frozen trenches and muddy foxholes, tight tolerances meant jammed actions. The Mosin-Nagant's loose fit meant it kept firing when other rifles froze solid. Its 7.62 E54mm ER cartridge, one of the oldest military cartridges still in service today, delivered impressive ballistic performance with a 150-grain bullet traveling at approximately 2,800 feet per second. This gave it effective range and penetration against both personnel and light cover. Snipers loved the Mosin-Nagant's simplicity. There were few parts to break, and field maintenance required minimal tools. Soviet sniper Paneshsky, interviewed years after the war, stated he could guarantee headshots at 200 meters and body shots at 500 meters under favorable conditions. More impressively, German snipers who captured Mosin-Nagants reportedly preferred them to their own Kar-98k rifles, a remarkable testament to the Soviet rifle's practical effectiveness. The rifle weighed approximately 8.75 pounds and measured 48.5 inches overall, with a 28.7-inch barrel. This made it relatively long and heavy, which some snipers complained about, especially when stalking through dense forests or urban rubble. The wooden stock, often made from hastily cured wood during wartime production, had a tendency to warp during weather changes, potentially affecting Zero. But these were minor complaints in the grand scheme. When a Soviet sniper needed to kill a German officer at 400 meters, the Mosin-Nagant delivered. When Vasily Zaitsev defended Stalingrad, picking off Nazi soldiers one by one from the ruins of the Lazur chemical factory, his Mosin-Nagant never failed him. Between October and December 1942, Zaitsev personally killed 225 enemy soldiers, and his weapon was as much a part of that legend as his skill. The Soviets produced approximately 330,000 sniper variant Mosin-Nagants during the war, an industrial achievement that reflected their doctrine of quantity and reliability over refinement. Every rifle represented a potential sniper in the field, a ghost waiting to strike, and in the vast expanses of the Eastern Front, where engagements often occurred at 300 to 400 meters in rural areas and 100 meters in urban combat, the Mosin-Nagant's capabilities were perfectly matched to the tactical reality. This was a weapon designed not for perfection but for victory through persistence, reliability, and the sheer will of the soldiers who carried it into hell. The production methods behind the Mosin-Nagant sniper rifles revealed much about Soviet industrial philosophy during the war. Unlike the Germans, who maintained strict quality control standards even as their war effort collapsed, the Soviets prioritized volume. Factories churned out rifles at extraordinary rates, with quality inspectors focusing on essential functionality rather than cosmetic perfection. Tool marks, rough finishes, and mismatched parts were common, but the rifles worked. And that was what mattered when the Wehrmacht was at the gates of Moscow and Leningrad. The scope mounting system evolved throughout the war. Early models used various mounting solutions, but the side-mounted rail system that became standard allowed the scope to sit offset from the bore, which meant snipers could still use the iron sights if their optic was damaged or fogged. This redundancy proved invaluable in combat. Many snipers reported that during intense cold, their scopes would fog or freeze, rendering them useless. The ability to quickly transition to iron sights and continue engaging targets at 300 to 400 meters kept Soviet snipers in the fight. The Mosin-Nagant's ammunition logistics were also a significant advantage. The 7.62Y54 Mauser cartridge was the standard machine gun round for the Soviet military, used in the Maxim M1910, the DP-27, and later the SG-43. This meant sniper ammunition was always available, even in desperate supply situations. Snipers typically carried 120 rounds into combat, distributed across ammunition pouches and pockets. The interchangeability with machine gun ammunition meant that if a sniper ran low, he could requisition rounds from any infantry unit, and this logistical simplicity was a cornerstone of Soviet military doctrine and gave their snipers an operational flexibility that German snipers sometimes lacked. Now, let's examine the German Karabiner 98k, a rifle that represented the pinnacle of Mauser engineering and German precision manufacturing. The Kar98k was adopted on June 21, 1935, as the standard service rifle of the Wehrmacht. It was a shortened version of the legendary Gewehr 98 that had served Germany through World War I, hence the K designation for Kurs, meaning short, chambered in 7.92 Exatom 57mm Mauser, one of the most powerful and accurate military cartridges ever developed. The Kar98k was a masterpiece of bolt-action design. Its controlled feed Mauser action, with dual front locking lugs and a non-rotating extractor that gripped the cartridge rim the moment it left the magazine, was considered by many to be the finest military bolt-action system ever created. The rifle featured a 5-round internal magazine fed by stripper clips, allowing for fast reloading. The Kar98k measured approximately 43.6 inches overall with a 23.6-inch barrel and weighed about 8.8 pounds without optics. When German military planners recognized the need for dedicated sniper rifles, they began selecting Kar98k rifles from production lines based on accuracy testing. Only rifles that could place 3 out of 5 shots within an 8 cm by 12 cm rectangle at 100 meters, with all 5 shots inside a 12 cm circle, approximately 4.1 MOA, were approved for sniper conversion. This was the minimum standard, and many sniper rifles performed significantly better. However, wartime testing revealed considerable variance. A March 1945 report from German sniper schools noted that tested Kar-98k sniper rifles produced groupings ranging from 2.5 to 6.6 MOA at 1,000 meters with 12-shot groups. This meant that an exceptionally accurate example, shooting 1.5 MOA, would have been considered outstanding for the era. The Germans developed several optical sights for their sniper rifles, but the most common was the ZF-39, a family of scopes produced by various civilian manufacturers, including Zeiss, Hensoldt, and others. These were typically 4x or 6x magnification with excellent optical clarity. The ZF-39 scopes represented some of the finest optical engineering of the war. German glass quality was legendary, and these scopes maintained clarity even in challenging conditions. However, they had notable limitations. Unlike modern scopes, windage adjustment was not built into the optic itself, but was performed through the mounting system. The elevation adjustment worked as a bullet drop compensator, meaning the shooter would dial from 100 to 500 meters, and the scope was supposed to compensate automatically. This system was dependent on exact ammunition ballistics, and in the chaotic logistics of the late war period, ammunition consistency became problematic. The Kar-98k sniper rifle's greatest strength was its inherent accuracy potential. The 7.92 car 57mm Mauser cartridge, when loaded with quality ammunition like the SS Patroni ball service round, delivered flat trajectory and excellent long-range performance. At 100 meters, the rifle's R50 accuracy, meaning 50% of shots would fall within this radius, was 3 cm, expanding to 18 cm at 500 meters. This gave skilled snipers the ability to make precision shots at extended ranges. Matthäus Hetzenauer, Germany's deadliest sniper, reportedly made his longest confirmed kill at 1,100 meters. Some sources say 1,200 yards, an extraordinary shot that demonstrated both the rifle's potential and the shooter's skill. However, the Kar-98k had significant drawbacks that became apparent in combat. The rifle's recoil was noticeably sharper than the Mosin-Nagants, and when a heavy scope and mounts were added, the ergonomics suffered. Josef Zepp Allerberger, Germany's second highest scoring sniper with 257 confirmed kills, noted that the Kar-98k's recoil meant most Wehrmacht conscripts scored very few combat hits, and even experienced snipers would avoid shooting more than 30 to 40 full-powered cartridges in one training session. The scoped rifle's balance was also compromised, making it more fatiguing to hold steady during long stalking missions. German sniper doctrine emphasized quality over quantity. Where the Soviets trained tens of thousands of snipers with basic skills and attached them to experienced mentors, the Germans established formal sniper schools that put candidates through 4-week intensive courses covering marksmanship, range estimation, stalking, camouflage, and fieldcraft. The training emphasized patience and discipline. German snipers were indoctrinated with principles like always only fire one shot from your position, if not, you will be discovered, and survival is 10 times camouflage and 1 time firing. This created a 2-tier system among German snipers. School-trained snipers were far more effective and were employed more judiciously by unit commanders. Hastily trained snipers, common in the desperate late war period, were significantly less effective. The Kar-98k's ammunition was not interchangeable with German machine guns, which used the same 7.92 57mm cartridge, but with different loadings and priorities. Sniper ammunition was supposed to be specially selected for consistency, but as Germany's industrial capacity crumbled and supply lines collapsed, ammunition quality became increasingly inconsistent. This affected zero retention and made long-range shooting unpredictable. Despite these challenges, in the hands of an expert, the Kar-98k was a devastating weapon. Hetzenauer used both a Kar-98k with a 6x scope and a semi-automatic Gewehr 43 with a 4x scope, depending on the tactical situation. His 345 confirmed kills in just 10 months of combat from August 1944 to May 1945 worked out to more than 1 kill per day. He operated in the Carpathians, Hungary, and Slovakia, often providing covering fire for retreating German units against overwhelming Soviet forces. The Kar-98k's controlled feed Mauser action deserves special attention because it represented decades of refinement. The dual lug bolt lockup distributed pressure evenly, contributing to accuracy and consistency. The non-rotating extractor, a hallmark of Mauser design, gripped the cartridge case from the moment it was stripped from the magazine until it was ejected. This meant that even in the worst conditions, with mud, ice, or debris in the action, the rifle would almost always extract and eject spent cases reliably. This was a significant advantage in combat, where a malfunction could mean death. The rifle's safety mechanism, located on the rear of the bolt shroud, could be operated silently, a critical feature for snipers who might spend hours in position waiting for a target to appear. The slight turn of the safety from vertical to horizontal made no sound, unlike some other rifles whose safeties clicked audibly. German snipers also appreciated the rifle's balance. Despite complaints about the added weight of optics, the basic Kar-98k had excellent handling characteristics. The stock design, with its distinctive straight comb and steel butt plate, allowed for consistent cheek weld and rapid target acquisition. The trigger, when properly adjusted by unit armorers, could be quite crisp, typically breaking between 3 and 5 pounds. This was slightly lighter than the Soviet standard and gave German snipers a marginal advantage in precision shooting. The stripper clip loading system also gave the Kar-98k an edge in sustained engagements. A trained soldier could reload the rifle in seconds, pressing a 5-round stripper clip into the magazine with a single firm stroke. This was faster than the Mosin-Nagant's similar system, largely because the Kar-98k's magazine was designed with slightly more generous tolerances that accepted cartridges more smoothly. In firefights where a sniper might need to engage multiple targets quickly, this speed advantage could be life-saving. With the technical foundations established, let's examine how these rifles performed in actual combat on the Eastern Front. This is where theory meets reality, where engineering specifications become life and death outcomes. The Soviet sniper program was revolutionary in its scope and ambition. After the humiliation of the Winter War, where Finnish snipers, led by the legendary Simo Heiha, inflicted devastating casualties on Soviet forces, Stalin ordered a massive expansion of sniper training. By 1942, sniper schools were operating throughout the Soviet Union, training both men and women. Yes, women. The Soviet Union was unique among major combatants in deploying female snipers in large numbers, with several like Lyudmila Pavlichenko achieving legendary status with over 300 confirmed kills. Soviet sniper doctrine emphasized teamwork. Snipers typically operated in pairs, a shooter and a spotter. The spotter would observe, estimate range, watch for threats, and identify targets while the shooter focused on the shot. After each engagement, the team would often relocate and switch roles, preventing fatigue and distributing the psychological burden of killing. The primary targets were high-value personnel, officers, machine gun crews, radio operators, and artillery observers. Soviet snipers were taught that killing an officer could disrupt an entire German unit's cohesion, while eliminating machine gunners could open gaps in defensive lines that infantry could exploit. The psychological impact was equally important. German soldiers knew that Soviet snipers were everywhere, watching, waiting. This constant fear degraded morale and made simple tasks like moving between positions or observing from trenches potentially fatal. Vasily Zaitsev embodied the Soviet sniper ideal. Born in the Ural Mountains, he grew up hunting deer and wolves with his grandfather, learning patience and marksmanship from childhood. When he arrived at Stalingrad in September 1942, he was initially just another rifleman in the 284th Rifle Division, but his natural shooting ability was quickly recognized. Between September 22nd and October 19th, 1942, Zaitsev killed 40 enemy soldiers. This caught the attention of his commanders and the Soviet propaganda machine. By December 17th, his tally had reached 225 confirmed kills. He became a hero of the Soviet Union and a symbol of Soviet resistance. His exploits were featured in newspapers and radio broadcasts, and he was even tasked with training other snipers in his techniques. Zaitsev's preferred hunting ground was the ruins of Stalingrad's industrial district, particularly around the Lazur chemical factory. The bombed-out buildings provided countless firing positions and concealment opportunities. His tactics were simple but effective. He would study German positions for hours, noting movement patterns and identifying where officers and valuable targets appeared. Then he would wait, sometimes for an entire day, until the perfect shot presented itself. One shot, one kill, then immediate relocation. German soldiers stationed at Stalingrad learned to fear the daylight hours when Soviet snipers were most active. The legendary duel between Zaitsev and German sniper school director Major Erwin König, while popularized in the film Enemy at the Gates, remains historically disputed. However, whether or not König existed, the counter-sniper warfare at Stalingrad was brutally real. German commanders, frustrated by mounting sniper casualties, deployed their own expert marksmen to hunt the hunters. This created a deadly chess match where patience, fieldcraft, and the slightest mistake determined who lived and who died. Soviet snipers faced significant challenges beyond enemy counter-snipers. The Mosin-Nagant's length made it difficult to maneuver in tight ruins. The rifle's tendency to produce a significant muzzle flash, especially with wartime ammunition that used less refined powder, could give away a sniper's position. To counter this, some Soviet snipers fired from deep within dark rooms, using the shadows to conceal their muzzle flash. Others would create false positions, leaving helmets or dummy rifles visible to draw German fire and reveal enemy sniper locations. The Eastern Front's brutal climate also tested both rifles and snipers. Winter temperatures regularly dropped to -30 or 40 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, metal became brittle, wood contracted, and optical sights could fog or frost internally. The Mosin-Nagant's loose tolerances proved advantageous here. Soviet snipers would often deliberately not oil their rifles during winter, knowing that oil would freeze and gum up the action. The dry, loose Mosin action continued to function reliably even when covered in snow and ice. German snipers, with their precisely fitted Kar-98k rifles, sometimes found their actions sluggish or frozen in the same conditions. German anti-sniper tactics evolved as the war progressed. They developed specialized counter-sniper teams, used artillery to saturate suspected sniper positions, and employed their own snipers to cover vulnerable areas. German snipers also adapted their techniques. Matthäus Hetzenauer's story provides insight into German sniper operations on the Eastern Front. Born in 1924 in the Tyrolean Alps of Austria, Hetzenauer was drafted into the 3rd Mountain Division in 1943. His upbringing in the mountains made him naturally suited to the physical demands of sniping, patience, cold tolerance, and the ability to remain motionless for hours. Hetzenauer operated primarily in the Carpathian Mountains, Hungary, and Slovakia from 1944 to 1945 during Germany's long retreat. His role was often to provide covering fire for withdrawing German units, engaging Soviet advance elements to slow their pursuit. His 345 confirmed kills in approximately 10 months represented an extraordinary kill rate, averaging more than one per day. Unlike Zaitsev, who achieved fame during the war, Hetzenauer remained relatively unknown until after. He was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross on April 17th, 1945, when Germany was already collapsing. Recognition for eliminating 2 enemy companies worth of soldiers while under artillery fire and enemy attacks. Hetzenauer's longest confirmed kill at 1,100 meters showcased both his skill and the Kar-98k's ballistic potential. Making such a shot required intimate knowledge of the rifle's trajectory, wind reading, range estimation, and perfect trigger control. At that distance, bullet drop for the 7.92 57mm Mauser would be several meters, and even a slight wind would push the bullet significantly off target. The fact that Hetzenauer could make this shot under combat conditions, likely without modern ballistic calculators or rangefinders, speaks to the training and natural ability of elite German snipers. German doctrine differed significantly from Soviet approaches. While Soviet snipers were numerous and operated across all fronts with varying levels of training, German snipers were more selective. Unit commanders used them strategically, positioning them to protect key defensive positions, cover retreat routes, or eliminate specific high-value targets. The German emphasis on camouflage and concealment was extraordinary. Snipers were taught to construct elaborate hides using natural materials to blend seamlessly with their environment. They would often remain in position for extended periods, observing enemy patterns before taking any shots. The maxim, survival is 10 times camouflage and 1 time firing, reflected this philosophy. German snipers understood that their value wasn't just in kills achieved, but in surviving to fight another day. A dead sniper, no matter how skilled, could be replaced by the enemy. A living sniper continued to disrupt enemy operations and tie down resources. However, by late 1944 and early 1945, when Hetzenauer was at his most active, German snipers faced overwhelming odds. The Red Army had learned hard lessons and developed effective counter-sniper tactics. Soviet artillery would saturate suspected sniper positions, and advancing Soviet infantry moved with greater caution and speed to minimize exposure. Despite these challenges, German snipers like Hetzenauer continued inflicting disproportionate casualties, slowing the Soviet advance and protecting German withdrawals. Now let's dive deeper into the comparative performance analysis, examining accuracy, reliability, ergonomics, optics, and the human factors that determined battlefield effectiveness. Starting with raw accuracy potential, both rifles were capable of exceptional precision when properly manufactured and maintained. The Mosin-Nagant sniper rifles, hand-selected from production lines and fitted with PU scopes, could achieve minute of angle accuracy between 1.5 and below 1.0. This meant that at 100 meters, a well-maintained Mosin-Nagant could group shots within a 1-inch circle or smaller. Extrapolated to 500 meters, this translated to approximately 7.5 to 5 inches of dispersion, more than adequate for center mass hits on human targets. Soviet sniper Paneshky confirmed this practical capability, stating he could guarantee headshots at 200 meters and body shots at 500 meters under favorable conditions. The Kar-98k's accuracy was comparable but with greater variance. Factory acceptance standards required 3 out of 5 shots within an 8 cm by 12 cm rectangle at 100 meters, with all 5 inside a 12 cm circle, 4.1 MOA. However, actual sniper variants often performed better, with the best examples achieving 5 MOA or superior groups, German testing data shows that at 100 meters, the Kar98k's R50 accuracy was 3 cm with a 93.7% confidence circle of 12 cm diameter. At 500 meters, this expanded to 18 cm at R50 and 72 cm at the 93.7% level. These numbers are slightly better than the Mosin-Nagant on paper, but the real-world difference was marginal and often came down to ammunition quality and shooter skill rather than inherent rifle superiority. Where the two rifles began to diverge significantly was in reliability under adverse conditions. The Mosin-Nagant's intentionally loose action, while less refined, proved more forgiving in the brutal Eastern Front environment. Soviet snipers routinely operated in conditions that would disable more precise rifles. Winter combat particularly favored the Mosin-Nagant. Soviet snipers learned to run their rifles completely dry during freezing weather, knowing that any lubricant would congeal and potentially jam the action. The Mosin's loose tolerances meant it continued to cycle reliably, even when covered in ice, snow, or frozen mud. German snipers with Kar98k rifles sometimes struggled with sluggish bolt operation in extreme cold, despite the Mauser action's superior design. The tighter tolerances that contributed to accuracy became a liability when temperatures dropped below -30 degrees Celsius. Anecdotal reports from German snipers describe having to use body heat to warm their rifles before they would function properly, losing precious time and potentially missing engagement opportunities. The optical systems also revealed interesting contrasts. The Soviet PU scope, with its modest 3.5x magnification, was simple and robust. The glass quality was adequate rather than exceptional, but the scope was designed to withstand abuse. The side-mounted rail system, while adding slight complexity, allowed the scope to be removed and reattached while maintaining zero reasonably well. This proved valuable when snipers needed to transport their rifles in confined spaces or when scopes became damaged or fogged. More importantly, the offset mounting allowed Soviet snipers to use their iron sights without removing the scope, providing critical redundancy. German ZF-39 scopes, typically offering 4x to 6x magnification, represented superior optical engineering. German lens manufacturing was among the finest in the world, and these scopes provided exceptional clarity and light transmission. In low-light conditions at dawn or dusk, when many sniper engagements occurred, the superior German optics gave their users an advantage. However, the complexity of German scope mounting systems and the bullet drop compensator elevation adjustment created potential failure points. As German logistics collapsed late in the war, replacement parts and proper ammunition became scarce, reducing the Kar98k's effectiveness. Ergonomics and handling characteristics significantly impacted combat effectiveness. The Mosin-Nagant was longer and slightly heavier than the Kar98k, making it more cumbersome in confined spaces like urban ruins or dense forests. Soviet snipers complained about the rifle's length, particularly when stalking through rubble or trying to maneuver in tight positions. The wooden stock, often made from hastily cured wood during wartime production, had a tendency to warp, potentially affecting accuracy and requiring periodic re-zeroing. The bolt handle's straight design required the shooter to lift the bolt high to clear the scope, a less efficient motion than the Kar98k's turned-down bolt handle. However, the Mosin-Nagant's recoil characteristics were more manageable. The combination of weight, stock design, and cartridge performance produced a push rather than a sharp snap. This made it easier for snipers to maintain composure during extended shooting sessions and allowed for faster follow-up shots if necessary. The Kar98k offered superior handling in many respects. Its shorter length made it easier to maneuver, and the turned-down bolt handle cleared the scope more efficiently, speeding up bolt manipulation. The rifle's balance, even with a scope attached, was generally better than the Mosin-Nagants. The stock design promoted a consistent cheek weld, and the safety could be manipulated silently, a significant tactical advantage. However, the sharper recoil, as noted by multiple German snipers, including Allerberger, made the rifle more punishing to shoot. The addition of scope and mounts, while dampening recoil somewhat, compromised the rifle's natural balance and made it more fatiguing during long stalking missions or when holding on target for extended periods. Ammunition considerations also played a crucial role. The Soviet 7.62 54mm R cartridge, while one of the oldest military cartridges still in service, delivered solid performance. Its ballistic coefficient was adequate for the typical engagement ranges on the Eastern Front, 300 to 400 meters in rural areas and 100 meters in urban combat. The critical advantage was logistical. The 7.63 MAR was the standard Soviet machine gun cartridge used in the Maxim M1910, DP-27, DSAK heavy machine gun, and later the SG-43 Goryunov. This meant Soviet snipers could requisition ammunition from any infantry unit, and supply was rarely an issue even in desperate situations. The Germans theoretically had the same advantage, as the 7.2 257mm Mauser was used in the MG-34 and MG-42 machine guns as well as the Kar-98k. However, sniper ammunition was supposed to be specially selected for consistency, and as German production quality declined during the war, the variance in ammunition performance increased. Some batches would shoot to one point of aim, while others would impact significantly differently, forcing German snipers to constantly verify zero and adjust their holds. This inconsistency undermined the Kar-98k's inherent accuracy advantage. Training and doctrine differences profoundly affected how these rifles were employed. The Soviet Union trained snipers in massive numbers, establishing schools throughout the country. The training was comprehensive but relatively brief, focusing on practical skills, marksmanship, range estimation, camouflage, and basic fieldcraft. Graduates were then paired with experienced snipers in the field for mentorship. This system produced many adequate snipers and a smaller number of exceptional ones. The emphasis was on quantity, saturating the front with enough snipers that even if individual skill levels varied, the cumulative effect was devastating. The Germans took the opposite approach. Their sniper schools ran intensive 4-week courses that covered marksmanship, advanced fieldcraft, camouflage, stalking, and sniper psychology. Instructors emphasized patience, discipline, and the mindset required to kill from concealment. The training produced highly skilled snipers, but in far smaller numbers. German doctrine used snipers more selectively, positioning them strategically rather than distributing them widely. This worked well early in the war when Germany held the initiative, but as the Eastern Front turned into a defensive struggle and then a retreat, the lack of sniper numbers became a significant disadvantage. The psychological dimension of sniper warfare cannot be overstated. Soviet snipers became symbols of resistance and heroism, celebrated in propaganda and elevated to almost mythical status. Zaitsev, Pavlichenko, and others were featured in newspapers, radio broadcasts, and newsreels. This served dual purposes: boosting Soviet morale and inflicting psychological damage on German forces, knowing that legendary snipers were operating in their sector, degraded German soldier morale and made routine tasks fraught with anxiety. German snipers, while equally skilled and often more professionally trained, never achieved the same propaganda value German military culture valued such achievements but didn't publicize them as aggressively. This was partly due to differing propaganda approaches and partly because Germany was increasingly on the defensive and celebrating individual snipers while losing the broader war sent mixed messages. However, among Wehrmacht units, skilled snipers were highly respected and provided crucial tactical advantages during the long retreat from 1943 to 1945. Counter-sniper warfare became increasingly sophisticated as the war progressed. Both sides developed tactics specifically to neutralize enemy snipers. The Soviets used artillery liberally, saturating suspected sniper positions with overwhelming fire. They also employed anti-tank rifles against sniper positions, knowing that the heavy bullets could penetrate walls and cover that would stop regular rifle fire. German counter-sniper tactics emphasized observation and patience, using optics to scan for telltale signs, scope glint, unnatural shadows, vegetation disturbance, or the barely perceptible motion of a sniper adjusting position. Once located, German snipers would either engage directly or call in mortar or artillery fire. The cat-and-mouse game between snipers and counter-snipers was perhaps the purest form of individual combat in World War II, where intelligence, skill, and equipment quality directly determined survival. By examining the legacies and ultimate impact of these two rifles, we can begin to answer the central question: which rifle won the Eastern Front? The answer is more nuanced than simple superiority in one metric or another. The Mosin-Nagant's greatest achievement was its role in the Soviet sniper program's success. Over 330,000 sniper rifles produced between 1941 and 1943 represented an industrial and doctrinal commitment that no other nation matched. And this massive number meant that Soviet snipers were ubiquitous. German soldiers couldn't move without considering the threat. Communications were disrupted, officers hesitated to expose themselves, and morale suffered under the constant psychological pressure. The Mosin-Nagant enabled this strategy through its reliability, simplicity, and compatibility with Soviet mass production capabilities. Even with hasty training and variable ammunition quality, a soldier with a Mosin-Nagant sniper rifle could be effective at the typical Eastern Front engagement ranges. When we consider that Vasily Zaitsev alone is credited with training over 28 snipers during the Battle of Stalingrad, each of whom then trained others, we see a multiplier effect. The Mosin-Nagant was the rifle that armed this exponential expansion of Soviet sniper capability. Its design philosophy, prioritizing reliability and maintainability over refinement, was perfectly matched to the Red Army's operational requirements and industrial capacity. The rifle remained in Soviet service until 1963, when it was finally replaced by the SVD Dragunov, a testament to its enduring utility. Even today, Mosin-Nagants see action in various conflicts, a remarkable service life for a design rooted in the 1890s. The Kar-98k's legacy is equally significant but different in character. It represented the apex of bolt-action military rifle design, incorporating decades of Mauser engineering refinement. In the hands of expertly trained snipers like Matthäus Hetzenauer, Josef Allerberger, and others, the Kar-98k was a precision instrument capable of extraordinary performance. Hetzenauer's 345 confirmed kills in 10 months, Allerberger's 257 kills, and numerous other German snipers with triple-digit tallies demonstrate the rifle's effectiveness when wielded by masters of the craft. The Kar-98k's superior ergonomics, excellent optics, and slightly better inherent accuracy gave skilled shooters every advantage. However, Germany's inability to produce these rifles and train snipers in sufficient numbers ultimately limited their strategic impact. While German snipers inflicted disproportionate casualties and provided crucial tactical advantages during defensive operations and retreats, they couldn't match the sheer scale of Soviet sniper operations. The Kar-98k was a scalpel, precise and deadly, but the Eastern Front required both scalpels and sledgehammers, and Germany could only provide the former in limited quantities. The question, which rifle won the Eastern Front, must be answered within the context of each nation's strategic situation and requirements. The Soviet Union needed a rifle that could be produced in enormous quantities, maintained in terrible conditions by soldiers with minimal training, and remain effective at the engagement ranges where most fighting occurred. The Mosin-Nagant exceeded these requirements. Its loose tolerances, simple design, and robust construction made it ideal for the Red Army's doctrine of overwhelming numerical superiority and acceptable casualty rates. The Germans needed a rifle that maximized the effectiveness of their limited numbers of highly trained snipers, providing superior accuracy and optics to enable precision engagement at extended ranges. The Kar-98k met these needs admirably. Its refined action, excellent glass, and precision manufacturing gave German snipers every technical advantage, but technical superiority cannot overcome numerical and strategic disadvantages. By 1943, Germany was fighting a losing war of attrition on the Eastern Front, and no amount of sniper excellence could change that fundamental reality. Statistical analysis reveals interesting patterns. Soviet snipers with 100+ kills were numerous, with many achieving 200, 300, or even 400+ confirmed kills. Lyudmila Pavlichenko had 309, Zaitsev had 243, some sources say up to 468 total, and numerous others achieved similar numbers. German snipers also had impressive tallies, with Hetzenauer at 345 and Allerberger at 257 leading the count, but the total number of German snipers achieving such figures was smaller. This reflects the different operational tempos and tactical situations. Soviet snipers operated in an offensive war after 1943 with abundant targets and support. German snipers increasingly fought defensively, covering retreats and facing overwhelming enemy numbers. The rifles themselves were supporting actors in these larger dramas, enabling but not determining outcomes. A fascinating postscript to this comparison is the reported preference of German snipers for captured Mosin-Nagants. Multiple sources reference German snipers choosing Soviet rifles over their issued Kar-98ks, finding them more reliable and better suited to Eastern Front conditions. This suggests that in the harsh reality of combat, reliability and simplicity often trump precision and refinement. A rifle that always works is more valuable than a rifle that shoots slightly better when everything is perfect. In the frozen forests, bombed cities, and muddy trenches of the Eastern Front, perfection was never an option. Survival and mission completion required tools that functioned regardless of conditions. The Mosin-Nagant was that tool. So which rifle won the Eastern Front? The answer is the Mosin-Nagant, not because it was technically superior, it wasn't in many measurable ways, but because it was strategically superior. It enabled the Soviet Union to deploy sniper capabilities on a scale no other nation achieved, turning sniper operations from niche special operations into a fundamental component of infantry doctrine. This strategic success created a lasting doctrinal legacy. Modern Russian military sniper doctrine still reflects lessons learned during the Great Patriotic War. The emphasis on reliability, simplicity, and mass deployment over boutique precision systems traces directly to the Mosin-Nagant era. The SVD Dragunov, which replaced the Mosin-Nagant in 1963, inherited its predecessor's philosophy: adequate accuracy, excellent reliability, and the ability to function in the hands of moderately trained soldiers rather than requiring elite specialists. Western military sniping doctrine evolved differently, emphasizing precision, specialized training, and selective employment, more aligned with German wartime approaches. This divergence reflects different military cultures and strategic situations, but both approaches proved valid within their contexts. The Mosin-Nagant versus Kar-98k comparison ultimately illustrates a fundamental truth about military equipment. The best weapon is the one best suited to the strategic and operational requirements of the force using it, not the one with the most impressive specifications. The Soviet Union needed to arm hundreds of thousands of snipers quickly with rifles that would function reliably in the worst conditions imaginable. The Mosin-Nagant delivered. Germany needed to maximize the effectiveness of limited numbers of highly trained specialists with rifles offering superior precision. The Kar-98k delivered, but in the arithmetic of the Eastern Front, where Soviet advantages in manpower, production capacity, and strategic depth ultimately prevailed, quantity had a quality all its own. The Mosin-Nagant embodied this principle and contributed meaningfully to Soviet victory. For that reason, when we ask which rifle won, the answer is clear: the rifle that armed the winners. The Eastern Front was a crucible where metal, wood, and human will were tested to destruction. Millions died, empires collapsed, and in the shadows of this apocalyptic struggle, snipers fought their own silent war, one trigger pull at a time. The Mosin-Nagant Model, 1891-30, and the Carabiner 98k were the instruments of this deadly craft, each reflecting the philosophy, capabilities, and strategic requirements of the nations that produced them. We've examined every aspect: design, accuracy, reliability, optics, ergonomics, ammunition, training, doctrine, and combat performance. We've walked through frozen ruins with Zaitsev and stalked through Carpathian forests with Hetzenauer. We've seen how these rifles performed in the hands of masters and in the hands of hastily trained conscripts, and through this comprehensive analysis, a clear picture emerges. The Kar-98k was the superior rifle by traditional metrics. Its Mauser action was smoother, its accuracy potential slightly higher, its ergonomics more refined, and its optics clearer. In a controlled environment with quality ammunition and expert maintenance, the Kar-98k would likely outperform the Mosin-Nagant in precision shooting competitions. But war is not a competition. War is chaos, deprivation, extremes of weather, and the absolute necessity to function when everything is falling apart. In this reality, the Mosin-Nagant's advantages became decisive. Its loose action cycled reliably when the Kar-98k's froze. Its simple construction meant field repairs with minimal tools. Its interchangeable ammunition with machine guns meant supply was rarely an issue. Its mass production enabled the Soviet Union to deploy sniper capabilities at a scale that fundamentally changed infantry warfare. And ultimately, this is why the Mosin-Nagant won the Eastern Front, not through marginal superiority in accuracy or ergonomics, but through strategic alignment with Soviet operational requirements and industrial capabilities. The rifle enabled a sniper program that terrorized German forces, inflicted disproportionate casualties, and provided a psychological warfare advantage that compounded Germany's growing disadvantages. Vasily Zaitsev's 243 confirmed kills with his Mosin-Nagant didn't just eliminate enemy soldiers. They inspired thousands of Soviet snipers and demoralized German forces facing an enemy who could kill from unseen positions with apparent impunity. Matthäus Hetzenauer's 345 kills with his Kar-98k represented extraordinary individual achievement and tactical effectiveness, but couldn't alter the strategic situation. One rifle armed the victors. The other armed those who, despite superior individual equipment and training in many areas, ultimately lost. This comparison offers profound lessons about military procurement and doctrine that remain relevant today. The temptation to pursue technical perfection must be balanced against operational requirements, production capabilities, and strategic context. A good rifle that can be produced in large numbers and maintained easily may contribute more to victory than a perfect rifle available only in limited quantities. The Mosin-Nagant succeeded because it was good enough, reliable enough, and numerous enough. These qualities, combined with the courage and skill of the snipers who carried it, proved sufficient to help win the most brutal conflict in human history. In the final analysis, when we ask which rifle won the Eastern Front, we must answer the Mosin-Nagant, because it was the rifle that armed the side that won, and it fulfilled that role admirably. The Kar98k remains one of the finest bolt-action rifles ever made, a masterpiece of engineering that served with distinction. But on the Eastern Front, excellence without sufficient scale was not enough. The Mosin-Nagant, with all its rough edges and compromises, proved that sometimes simple reliability and mass availability are more valuable than perfection. It was the rifle the Red Army needed exactly when they needed it, and it helped deliver victory in the most decisive theater of World War II. That is the ultimate measure of a weapon's worth, not how well it performs in ideal conditions, but whether it contributes meaningfully to victory in the terrible conditions of actual war. By that standard, the Mosin-Nagant Model 1891-30 earned its place in history. The legacies of both rifles extend far beyond World War II. The Mosin-Nagant continued serving in conflicts worldwide for decades, appearing in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and numerous regional conflicts. Its robust design and abundant surplus supplies made it a favorite of resistance movements and armies with limited budgets. Even in the 21st century, Mosin-Nagants remain in use in various conflicts, a testament to the longevity of well-executed, simple designs. The Kar98k's legacy influenced post-war sporting rifle development, with countless hunting rifles based on the Mauser 98 action. It remains the gold standard for controlled feed bolt-action designs, and modern rifles like the Winchester Model 70 and CZ550 are direct descendants. For collectors and historians, both rifles represent tangible connections to the Eastern Front's defining struggle. Each scratch, ding, and mark on surviving examples tells a story of survival in conditions we can barely imagine. And for veterans who carried these rifles through hell and somehow survived to old age, they remained powerful symbols of youth sacrifice and the terrible lottery of war, where a split second or a few inches determined life or death. So when we conclude this comparison, we honor both rifles for what they were: tools wielded by men and women in humanity's darkest hour, instruments that killed efficiently but were themselves morally neutral. The responsibility lies with those who started the war, those who perpetuated it, and ultimately with those who ended it. The Mosin-Nagant and Kar98k were simply there, reliable or refined, simple or sophisticated, doing the grim work their users demanded. And in that work, one rifle armed the victors and shaped the post-war world. That rifle was the Mosin-Nagant Model 1891-30, the rifle that won the Eastern Front.